this book, trying my best to find the cool, interesting, the best parts of it, so I wouldn't waste time in the next video. I spent an hour reading the first 2 pages the other day when I tried making one, flipping through it. And I couldn't help but make a correlation. I couldn't help seeing all these different areas of the brain that seem to tie directly into ASMR. And I thought this would be a cool perspective as I browse through the book. And I was very much inspired by ASMRctica's new video, What Do Tingles Feel Like? As he so creatively was sitting in a park, in a tree, intermittently tapping on the bark, in the bark. Sitting in a tree here. Curious to know about the tingles, and afterwards I started to think about making a video on my own channel. And talk about tingles. So that's the reason why I decided to do this video today. Because also that's something that could be great to inform or tell people about, because maybe someone wonder if they can, what tingles are and if they can feel it, or maybe they have experienced it but are not sure or anything. I don't know, but I've heard from you, some of you, in your comments, you describe and let me know that you experience tingles from my videos, and yeah, I rarely get tingles from videos, ASMR videos on YouTube. So ASMR on YouTube is not connected to tingles so much for me. As he browsed through the arc of his perspective on ASMR. So I'll try to remember to put a link in the description to this video of his. He's so in tune with what makes ASMR. So let's go ahead and open this book up and browse through and try to find some ASMR in the human brain. We're going to find bits of it scattered all throughout the book. We have a history of the brain and how it is we know about certain parts of the brain. And we also have a good context of the landmarks in neuroscience, scanning the brain in an overview of our contemporary understanding of it. And then we have its link with the rest of the body. We have the anatomy of the brain itself, different structures in it, and some of the mapping of the brain, different systems. And then particularly interesting is obviously the senses. How we sense the world, seeing, hearing, how we perceive the world. The sixth sense. The sixth sense might be a particularly interesting one to explore. Movement, emotions, the social brain. I think this is going to be a very useful section in discovering what might be at the core of why these videos, when they're done well, which is probably not right now, but have such a deep unconscious effect on our bodies. So this whole section here, the emotions, the social brain, and language, communication, and memory, is going to be a focal point. Strange nature and nurture. This section, consciousness, sleep, and dreams. That'll be a good one too. And attention, definitely. Okay. Influencing the strange brains. Okay, so let's so I read this, and this took me an entire hour to get through last time. So we went through the basic function of the brain, and the past historical perception of it, that the Egyptians and many other ancients didn't even think the brain did anything. They thought the mind was located in the heart, and that the brain, I think Descartes, or no, Aristotle thought the brain was merely a cooling system for the blood in the body, which I think is partly right, because we have so much blood flow to our brain. So we have function, scanning the brain, and there's so much information here. I gotta be very aware of how little time I have and how much information there is. I can start with the general structures of the brain. The next 20 pages here I'm flipping through are CT scan, is it? Is this a PET scan? These are MRIs of a healthy 55-year-old man. So it might be useful to look through some of this. I'd like to look at the overall structure of the brain. And then once we get a grasp of the structure and the systems in it, maybe we can look at the functions of the systems and the ways we perceive and how stimuli affect our state of mind, our consciousness. So the frontal lobe you can see there, it's right behind our eyeballs. And this is a cross-section of our brains from our face backwards. The frontal cortex is most recently evolved part of the prefrontal cortex and is mostly involved in forward planning, which makes sense why it's so hard to plan. The cortex scans the yellow lines, heavily folded, large surface area. The orbitofrontal gyri, located at the bottom of the brain. Here, it's kind of right, almost directly behind our eyeballs. Located at the bottom of the brain, receives signals about smell and taste, and are also concerned with predicting the future. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead because I'm going to be here all day if I don't skip ahead. So, the brain and the body. The brain, the primary task is to help maintain the whole body in an optimal state relative to the environment in order to maximize the chances of survival. It does this by registering stimuli and then responding by generating action in the process. It also generates subjective experience. Now I think that's important. It's important when relating this to ASMR because fundamentally, I think your body can only go into a deep state of relaxation when you secure, when you feel safe, that's the only time that you're going to allow someone to get this close to your ears. Because evolutionarily, if you allowed someone this close to your ears and you didn't trust them, bad things were bound to happen. But the fact that you in this situation, if you're still watching this, it's a one-way street. There's no way I could harm you even if I wanted to, which I definitely don't, by the way. And on top of that, you know implicitly and explicitly that I want to help you relax. And I want you to feel better. I want to make you feel less anxious and less stressed. And ASMR is a feeling that sends chills down your spine, because your spine is the root of your brain. If our cortex is the branches in the trees, the tree limbs, then the root, the trunk, and the thing that your entire sense organ, your entire body, your entire system of perception is grounded in, is the brainstem. And interestingly enough, look at this. The arousal section of the brain is located in the deepest part of your brain. And it goes down, down, down into your brainstem and down into your spine. And from there, all your other organs, all your touch organs, your finger nerves, and your toe nerves, and your leg and arms and abdomen are directly connected to this spinal cord. So, when those chills, if those chills ripple and emanate down your spine, what that's telling your body is that it can relax. Your brain is determined. It's in a very safe, non-anxiety provoking, very explored territory, and you can predict that I won't be making any abrupt sounds. You can predict many things that are going to happen, and the chance of an unpredictable, startling noise, other than the ads, of course, and I'm very sorry. Sorry about those ridiculous ads at the beginning of every video. The likelihood that something loud like this airplane coming in is going to come is very low, because I usually try to edit those out. And I think essentially the people who claim, like ASMRctica was elaborating on, he as well, I'm with him on this, he thinks that everybody gets ASMR. Everybody is capable of feeling it, but those who claim that they don't feel it from videos while they're being tested or experimentally questioned, those people, I think, don't don't have a proclivity to be as open-minded. So I think, and this is completely speculation right here, but I think that in order to feel ASMR, you have to allow yourself to be empathetic, to be receptive, and to be open to considering another's point of view, another person's perspective, and allowing someone to get close to you and to feel what they feel, and to have an active imagination that allows the non-existence of touch, taste, smell, and some visual elements to be filled in when you're watching these videos. So you have to have a brain that is receptive, that is predisposed to feel these pages being touched. But let's, why don't I slow down and stop speculating so much? Because I have a huge book that has many facts. And speaking of facts, let's briefly talk about a handful about the brain. It's highly compact. If you smoothed out all the wrinkles in the cortex, the brain would cover an area about 2.5 square feet. In connectivity, the brain has around 100 billion neurons. There are more potential connections between the neurons than there are atoms in the known universe. Wow. So, you are the most complex thing. System, structure, procedure, process, phenomenon in the known universe. I think that's so deep, and it's just, frankly, it's awesome. So a fetus grows neurons at the rate of 250,000 a minute. And a person is born with nearly all the neurons of an adult, but the neural networks are not mature yet. So the process of growing mentally is less physical and much more a matter of stimulating and forming neural pathways that your brain can then use to travel along in future experiences. Information travels at different speeds within different types of neurons. Transmission speeds range from 3 to 330 feet per second. Which, of course, means you can send a signal to move your toes and fingers very quickly, but not immediately quickly. And these last two are actually really interesting. You don't lose brain cells as you age. What actually happens is that some functions may decline, but you can actually maintain the networks, or even form new ones, by exercising your brain, by challenging it, by reinforcing the habits, the ways of thinking, the exercises of thinking that allow you to be a manipulator of ideas. And then the last one is that the brain tissue doesn't actually have any pain receptors. So your brain cannot feel pain. So this part here briefly, I just want to show you. I won't read much about it. I just want to show you that the brain is connected intimately. It's almost like we're a plant that is able to walk around and think about the things that its roots are touching. Because it really does look like one big taproot, doesn't it? With all these tendrils, dendrites, neurons, nerve endings radiating out from the central taproot. And with our brain being the receptor of these perceptions and stimuli. So when you think about the brain, don't forget that the most deeply rooted part of your brain protrudes out and down your spine, all the way down to the end, and along each nodule, each vertebrae. Huge nerve endings branch out along your arms and along your body to your organs, down your legs, all the way down to your toes, down to your toenails, your limbs, your fingers. Every part of your body is directly linked to your spinal cord, which has a direct link to the very core of the brain. Okay, so the brain and the nervous system. So I wanted to talk more about perception and consciousness, but I also, of course, want to touch on the cranial nerve system. And don't worry about paying too close attention to this. There won't be a cranial nerve examination at the end of this. So there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves that are linked directly to the brain. So the brainstem and the nervous system, the brain and the nervous system, the spinal cord, is one of the most important parts to understanding how we are our bodies. The brain sits at the top of the body, directing and coordinating all action and activity throughout its entirety. It does so via the spinal cord and the nerves that stem from it at various points along its length, and branch out into a network that spans the entire body. So, all these spinal nerves come off the brain to let us be aware of our surroundings, except for the head. The head's nerve fibers, instead of being connected to the cord and being routed directly up into the center, the depth of the brain, it has its own connections called cranial nerves. So these cranial nerves have a direct connection from our head and our face to our brains. And we have different types of cranial nerves. We have the olfactory. So it's connected. Smell molecule in a nasal cavity trigger the nerve impulses that pass along this nerve to olfactory bulb, then onto limbic areas. We have the trigeminal nerve, which is your chin, forehead, eye, cheek, and temple. And I guess teeth as well. And then the facial nerve is the tongue. Two-thirds of the tongue from the taste buds. Salivary glands, lacrimal gland, which secretes tears and lubricates the eye. And down here we have the spinal accessory nerve, which is neck and head movements. And it says the cranial nerves 1 and 2 connect to the cerebrum, while the cranial nerves 3 to 12 connect to the brainstem. Okay, so 1 and 2 is your smell and your optic nerves. And then all the other ones, the mouth, throat, vestibulocochlear is the inner ears, so hearing. So, interesting. So it looks like hearing, interestingly enough. Yeah, it looks like your hearing is it's like one of the most deep senses on your entire face. So that's really, really interesting for ASMR, that beyond smelling and beyond visual, which are connected to the cerebrum, which is the more, let's look at the anatomy here. It's a more recent development. See if we can get a good anatomical picture here. cerebrum. Your hearing is directly connected to your brainstem. Where's the cerebrum? Yeah, the smell and optical nerves are so much more recently evolved. I mean, not that much more, but it seems like sound is, maybe because it has to do with physical vibrations, whereas smell is chemical and optical nerves is light. So it's almost like different types of communication, I guess, of information reception. That's so interesting, though. So, brain size. So the arrangement of arteries. Here it says, allows blood to be supplied by another route if one of the pathways is blocked. So you can see our brain is very adaptable. And then the brain volume here. So you can see that the modern humans are almost as big. I think Neanderthal here had a larger brain volume. The brains of hominids, modern humans, and their ancestors, what hominids are, underwent a surge of evolutionary changes that left them in some ways distinctly different, even from their near relatives, such as chimpanzees and gorillas. The main distinction between humans and chimps and gorillas is the size and density of the cortex, particularly the frontal lobe, which is responsible for complex thought and planning and judgment and self-reflection. No one knows why the human brain evolved as it did. It may have been some change in diet forced by the environment or by the product of living in groups. And that groups that depended on close interdependence for survival. And I think that's a really important observation for ASMR, is the social aspect of our nature. So the last thing I want to talk about today is going to be our similarities with even the most primitive animals like fish and reptiles, because I want to emphasize that there are perceptions, modes of perceiving and sensing and sorting through the data that we perceive. There are modes that we have no bearing on consciously whatsoever. We experience a stimulus, and our brains these structures that have been with us and are just modified from generation to generation, very slightly and more slightly from species to species. But there are things, the brain is what, one way of viewing it is as a mediator between the world of facts and things and energy external to us and our minds and the way we interact with those facts. I think Hegel said that we can never directly experience the world because we are the creation of our minds. In our minds, in our brains, in our body, it processes and filters out so much information that we are only privy to a little minute bit of the external world at any given moment. And you see there are studies that show that the human eye can only focus in high definition on a very, very small area of the visual field. And from there, like the size of a thumb or something, and everything outside of that is decreasingly lower and lower resolution. And that's a good analogy of the rest of our body, the way we work, because our brains are highly, highly complex. And we can think about a lot, but in order to think about something deeply, we have to not think about many, many other things in the world. So this says here that our brains evolved to enable animals to respond to environmental changes. The human brain has evolved to its present complexity through several stages, many of which are common to all animals. Its origins can be seen in the brains of other species, in which more primitive structures remain. So this is a good example of how what Kant called an a priori structure, that is, our bodies. It's a mediary structure between the world and our minds and our consciousness. All animals have to respond to changes in their internal and external environments in order to survive. To do this, they have evolved cells that are sensitive to stimuli, such as light and to vibrations. So the sensory cells are in turn connected to other cells that can move the organism or change its state in response to the stimulus. This system of interconnected nervous tissue is a crude form of the brain. So you can imagine a ganglia. Simplest system as seen in this hydra, a tiny aquatic invertebrate, consists of a loose network of sensory cells with clumps of interconnected cells called ganglia. So I think it's so important to learn more about the body, because we really, really don't understand who we are unless we understand our body. Especially insightful to that is how the body evolved, how we're connected has undergone considerable changes compared to primitive nervous systems of invertebrates. The brain of the invertebrate, or the brain of the vertebrate, is well developed, highly interconnected. The central nervous system is connected to the rest of the body by a peripheral nervous system that includes the fibers running to and from the sensory organs. So these fibers are the mediary. They're kind of like the messenger, the middleman to our brain. So the basic vertebrate brain, also sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain, consists of clusters of nuclei that lies just above the brainstem in humans. They include the modules that produce arousal, sensation, and reaction to stimuli. And of course, it's like the word oral or intercourse. It's not necessarily sexual unless you put the adjective sex or sexual in front of it. So arousal, sensation, and reaction. And arousal just means that it stimulates you in a way that would make you more aware of your environment, I would say. It readies you to receive incoming information. And sensation is that information, and reaction is your unconscious or conscious on a higher level choice of what to do with that information. It is unlikely, however, that these nuclei alone are sufficient to produce consciousness. This basic vertebrate brain does not include more advanced features such as the limbic system or the cerebral cortex, which exists only in the brains of mammals. And over here, the mammalian brain comprises a cluster of structures. So what we have in common with all other mammals, elephants, wolves, dolphins, cats, is these structures that evolved on top of the basic vertebrate or reptilian brain, known as the limbic system, and a wrinkled covering called the cortex, which interconnects with the limbic structures beneath. So on top of having the nerve endings going to our basic vertebrate brain, on top of that we have another intermediary structure called the limbic system and the cortex, which interconnects with the limbic structures beneath. The limbic system is part of the brain that produces emotions, and these are responses. So emotions are responses to stimuli that go beyond the basic grab or avoid reactions in the vertebrate brain and produce subtle and complex actions that are not always predictable. The limbic system also contains structures that encode experiences as memories to be recalled for use in the guiding of future actions. The emotional and memory faculties greatly increase the range and complexity of behavior that a mammal displays, because it is not governed purely by instinct. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and I want to go into a little bit of the brain's anatomy next time. But more than that, I want to go into the way we perceive information, in particular sound and language and communication, and the origins of language. And consciousness. Definitely want to go into more of consciousness. I think that's fascinating. Okay, and of course, attention. And of course, sleep and dreams. Sleep and dreams. Sleep and dreams. So next time we'll dive more into the mind and the conscious aspects of the brain, like how we perceive and emotion, and what things we pay attention to, how we communicate, how we hear, and what makes us feel.